Welcome to the 27 with Evan podcast, where we try to get to security truths faster than a drifting car will burn out its tires. Welcome and enjoy this interview. Welcome, Alex. It's good to have you on the podcast.
It's good to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to this. This is my cybersecurity professional debut on the public.
Tell us who you are, the essence of you.
The essence of me. Well, it's not super interesting, but hopefully I can be interesting here. I so I work full time as a security analyst, and I'm also going to school at the same time, trying to get my bachelor's in cybersecurity. I'm just about done with that. Hopefully, taking my time, but that's okay. Um, I don't know. I like cybersecurity. I like hacking stuff, learning all about it, helping people learn about it that don't know anything about it. So
Yeah.
that's it.
Tell us where you're going to school and what your degree is in.
So I'm going to Ensign College, which was LDS Business College, but it's in Salt Lake. Um, they have they've always had a cybersecurity program, at least for a while, but the bachelor's program is new. So that's what I'm doing.
Awesome. And
Yeah.
aren't you the president of a club there?
Yes, I'm currently the president of the cybersecurity club. So
I think that's really cool. Just first off for being involved, but what does that entail? What does that actually look like for how you're involved with the club?
yeah, so as the president of the club, um, kind of just leading out on everything. So we have kind of a small leadership group, and then just we try to meet, every week and just learn about all the different kinds of hacking topics you can think of. So like how to defend against hacking, how to do it ethically, of course. Um, Learning about all the different tools there are, and we also do competitions. So like we have one coming up in a few weeks here, where a lot of different colleges will come together, and they'll be given like a virtual network to defend. Um, and each school kind of acts as like a blue team, and then they have like a red team on site that like tries to get into your network, and you have to defend it while keeping up services. So it's really just like an all-encompassing thing. So that's probably one of the big things we do. It's really fun.
I actually haven't
Um,
done a competition like that. That sounds really fun.
yeah, I've been doing it for a few years, and I think it's really fun. Like, even if we do terribly, like even if the red team like gets in and just obliterates our network, like we still, it's a safe environment where we get to learn about what that looks like, and um, learn hands-on skills on how to do it. The advisor at my school, he usually says like, in class we learn about cybersecurity topics, but like the club is kind of where we get to try out our hands on the keyboard. So
That's pretty sweet. Okay, so you've been a security analyst for a couple of years now. You've been a full-time security analyst with school, and so you've had a lot of insights into running a SOC. What's important there, what's not important. What are the most important things to running a SOC?
good question. So um, I think having I don't know, just having a strong team, and I think that starts with like a manager. Like my manager is awesome. He's on top of things. He makes decisions. He's aware of what's going on the team, and so I think it kind of starts there, where having a good manager on your back. I mean, that's good for any team, but it's also good for a SOC. So a lot of the things that make a good SOC comes from things that make a good team. But I think that's, for me, something I've noticed. Um,
So, what do you see in SOCs that's easy to focus on, but is a time waster?
Actually, it's a great question because um, I think that this might sound funny, but like responding to alerts. So like,
Responding
and
to alerts.
let me explain that. So I'm not saying I'm not saying having alerts is bad because that we need them. And I'm not saying responding to alerts always is bad, but I guess my opinion is like not every alert deserves like the same amount of work and effort into it. And so sometimes there's little issues, and not even maybe not even alerts, but just little security issues that come up. Um, like if like something will come up, and sometimes it's natural to be like, at least for me, and maybe others, but at least for me, like to kind of hyper focus on like, oh, like, and you kind of deep dive into it, but then it's like if you step back, it's like, oh, this is not even a high priority thing. So let's just make a decision and move on.
Yeah. So
Even
I
though,
saw.
yeah, even though there's might maybe even though maybe we might have time technically to look at it, it's not really that valuable. So we should just you kind of have to prioritize triage, whatever you want to call it, to decide like how much time do we need to spend on this? How much time does it deserve? And then just sometimes you just need to decide and move on to the next thing, something more important. So
I saw a LinkedIn post, I think it was last week, where they talked about they found that I think it was 90% of their true incidents came from less than 5% of their detections. And so they disabled a bunch of other detections, and all of a sudden it opened up time for more threat hunting and detection engineering, things like that.
yeah,
But back to your point, how do you even figure out if it's important or not? Like you look at something, how do you know if it's important or not?
that's a good question. I think part of it is having the training and knowledge to have the eye to say like, to be able to know um, like to be able to recognize if it's actually like, things are malicious or not, because that's really the first step is like you gotta when something comes in you have to be able to like the first thing is like is this like a real alert or not. Yeah, again, I back to what I said about training. I think having and this kind of goes back to what makes a good SOC too. Like I feel like in my training, like taking cybersecurity trainings and stuff, I've learned a lot about different IOCs and what to actually look for. Um, and so,
There's a lot of discussion online about the talent gap and uh, the availability of security jobs. I mean, in the last year, 2023 was a really interesting year seeing security teams become more efficient with what they have, reduced headcount, reduced tool spend, all of that. And what are you seeing on the side of those trying to get into the industry and the challenges they're facing?
there is a lot of people interested um, in learning cyber, and it's really cool to see that passion and drive from students, especially new students. Like, there's always every semester there's like new students come to me like, how can I get involved in the club? Because I really want to learn about this stuff. I think with the knowledge gap, maybe there is kind of that gap of like there is tons of people interested, but maybe eventually some people kind of change their mind or something. I don't I don't know if I usually see that though, because most people that jump into cyber they already are aware of already have some computers experience, some IT experience, whatever. They have a lot of drive. They just need a lot more knowledge because cybersecurity there's just tons of stuff to learn. And cybersecurity is I've really come to learn like cybersecurity is not a beginner field, which is kind of part of this frustration probably. Is like as I've been an analyst, I've realized like okay, I know about this type of attack, for example. Like I know about SQL injection, but I don't know how databases work. Kind of a knowledge gap there where like if people jump into cybersecurity right away, they learn all these things, but sometimes they don't actually know all the ins and outs of how the IT behind it works. they know how the attack works and the logic and stuff and why it happens, but they don't know how to set up a prediction database or something. You know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
so,
Yep. So that, I mean, that's in line with a lot of the arguments that you need to understand what you're defending when you're defending. Like the hackers know how your networks and databases work, so you should. Um,
mhm.
the other side of the coin is how can people get into cybersecurity if there's no entry level positions? And what would you say to that?
It's a great question. So I think if I was starting out, I would, I mean, I probably would just get an IT job first, which is actually what I had. I did tech support before being an analyst. I think that was a little bit helpful, but just learning how technology works, learning how computers work, not just as like a normal person where you're using Google Drive to make documents and emails and stuff, but like obviously a much deeper level. Um, and so yeah, it takes a lot more, or it takes a lot of um, learning it from up front. But for people who want to get a job, like a cybersecurity job, um, there is kind of a baseline you just have to reach. Like you need to have some extent of technology, some extent of um, just how computers work, and that's stuff you can learn at school, or you could learn it on your own. Like there's tons of free cybersecurity resources online. There's tons of good YouTube channels, like whatever, And so, um, but companies looking to hire more talent, I mean, from my perspective, I think it's really cool if companies like take in, interns for, and so like if you can take in interns, you can actually train up an intern in your company, and then they'll be more qualified right on the spot, and you'll have talent right there to pick from. And so it's definitely a cost, but like if you want talent, then you kind of have to just invest more in training people. And so
Yep.
that's what I would say.
Okay. So, yeah, in light of, so this has got me thinking about learning and how we learn things on the day to day. I think our day to day makes a huge difference on what we learn. Uh, and sometimes I feel like I am a bit siloed in what I learn. And I'll explain what I mean. I sell vulnerability management software, uh, and I interact with teams that are responsible for that. I'm not even the one patching or the one imp- I necessarily implementing the software in their environment. And then beyond that, I never like work with the sysadmins to try to convince them to actually patch something. And I'm not working with the SOC. Like I'm not necessarily touching these things. And I think that happens from the SOC side as well. When I was a SOC analyst, I had no clue what the network admins were doing. When I would ask them about this connection made, they'd be like, "Oh yeah, this is migration or whatever. This is expected." And I'd be like, "I don't really know what the projects they're working on." So I think it's really helpful to have that background experience. But do you think there's any groups that the SOC works with that the SOC really doesn't understand, or that the other side really doesn't understand the SOC? Do you think there's any specifics of where communication breakdowns happen a lot?
Just in my experience, I feel um, like if you ask like if people like why people might not care about loan management, it's just like my simple answer would be like there's no sense of urgency for other teams that
What
aren't
do
in
you
cyber, like that aren't in security.
What do you mean?
So like maybe you've heard this before, like you know a company might not want to spend money on cybersecurity until there's an incident, right? And so because cybersecurity can be expensive, like it takes a lot of effort and a lot of configuration and a lot of things. Um, and so I don't know, I think it's just a simple principle. I feel like I've maybe seen it where like unless something happens, you might not feel the urgency to fix stuff. It's like, oh well, it's been working, and it's been okay, so we're just gonna keep going as is. All I'm saying is like when it comes to implementing new cybersecurity configurations and policies, people might not feel an urgency like we do to put in the effort to fix things like I don't know, say like just a random example, like if there's a website, database, whatever going on, and there's it's there's it's up to date and it's working well and it's stuff, but say like a new I don't know a new update comes out, but it's going to be kind of difficult to implement. The the business is gonna prioritize the business continuity, I guess.
Yeah.
And so they might kind of push off the security a little bit. Like like it's been working well. Like probably not gonna have anything issue with this. So like let's push it off till later, and then maybe it might be forgotten.
Let me see if I understand this. I'm going to give you 2 examples back to see if I understand.
Okay.
You're essentially saying that the business values revenue generation and business growth over security, and it can be tough for other departments to understand and prioritize security initiatives. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. If I need to collaborate something, I'll make a Google Doc, make it publicly editable, and send it to them. Like you just got to get things done, cut out expenses. And honestly, I don't patch stuff very well at home, or I'm trying to get better. The other thing I think about is there's a CISO I follow on LinkedIn. His name's Brent, and he has talked about Maslow's hierarchy. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like where humans, like, you have to eat food and live before you can think about shelter, and you have to have shelter before you can think about, I don't even remember the next step, family or mental health. Or it's similar with a business. If the business doesn't have revenue, it's sure as heck not going to care about security. If there's no revenue, there's no point in security. So
yeah,
of course that would come first.
I'm totally with you on that. And every company is different, but like I think in generally speaking, like the IT sort of admin side needs to understand that there needs to be security, but also us as security professionals do need to understand that security is not the number one priority in a company. And so when things maybe don't get done like we think they should, like, oh, it needs to be immediate, it needs to be right now, like it might not be that way because it comes down to the business decisions. Because yeah, if you try to lock down a network but it's not operational, like security or the availability is one of the 3 things that's important. If that's totally zero, then security defeat the purpose of the whole business. So, yes, so I think there needs to be just understanding on both sides that there needs to be a balance. And ultimately, like, to be honest, like, businesses, I feel like, see cyber issues, they kind of end up just like monetizing them. And that's the whole thing, I guess, about risk management is like, it comes down to how expensive is this risk that we have, and fixing it is determined by if we can afford it, and if we can, and what the risk is. Like if this hole is exploited, like how much is that gonna cost? So that's like the business decision. That's what happens there. And so I think as I've been an analyst, I've had to learn that it's like it's not all about just patching every hole we see. It's about patching the holes that we can afford to patch
that actually matter.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. What are some big ticket risk reduction items that you think for most businesses, or a lot of businesses, could make a massive impact on what you could say their risk register, or whatever you want to call it?
Yeah. I think the number one is just like go to the OWASP top 10, because like the internet facing things in the company is that's like the number one target in general of any company. I think it's just like if you like, because that's how like attackers. That's what cybersecurity is all about. Like you're protecting from attacks from the internet, and that not every cyber attack happens from the internet, but in general, like that's where all the like a lot of stuff is, and so the front line needs to be secure. So I'd say like checking out the like you can check the MITRE too, but like OWASP top 10 will show you the top 10, and like you can do specifically the web one. Like there's a web top 10, and you can look at that and say, all right, let's make sure these things are covered. And I think if you cover those big things, because if you leave those open, like you're hopeless with security.
Yep.
So like you got to cover all the known things. You got to cover all of those things.
Yep. So I'm going to make a logical jump here. If you're saying that that's the most important thing, you're saying that the OWASP top 10 and being what I would coin, there's a term out there, another guy on LinkedIn, his name's Micah, and he pushes something called threat-informed defense. Like all of your defense should be focused on the actual threat.
Like maybe I can kind of introduce this. Hopefully I can be clear with this. So if you look at like a bar from 0 to 100% like secure. So from 0 to 100%, I think a lot of that is just patching stuff that's already known. So like I said, like MITRE framework, yes, that's a lot of that is stuff that's already known. So it's like, okay, patch all of that. And then on top of that, you have, a SOC. You have the blue team where they're watching for alerts, they're watching for threats. That's another chunk of the security. And then, but another chunk, just like what we're talking about, is that threat intelligence where like, because there's kind of an area where you don't have alerts for things, or there's maybe you have alerts for things that you know about, but maybe there's alerts for things or there's not alerts for things, and those things are the things that you don't know about. Mm-hmm. So there's kind of this area where there's like kind of a gap in security, and so I think that gap is where the informed threat intelligence comes in, where like you need someone who's aware of what's going on in the environment. So like, or on the outside, so you can say, okay, like, oh, this is a new like vulnerability that was discovered in this specific software that we use. So let's spend on that. Because and so I haven't been in that position, but like that's kind of how I see it right now. Is like, that's
okay.
Kind of,
so building defense against threats. What I want to know from you is if somebody wants to really upskill in this area and they're not doing it in their day-to-day, how can somebody do this? Do they need to take a detection engineering course? Do they need to take a course on threat intel? Do they need to go build a home lab and do pfSense and start looking at patching and like what direction would you take? Would you do CTS? Like what would be the most effective way, or one of the more effective ways to go about doing this?
I mean, I think there's a variety of ways to do it, but ultimately, I think home lab is good. Online trainings are good. I think those are good things. But yeah, ultimately, you need to spend the time on it. I think when it comes to preparing for that, like something I learned early on is you got to be up to date on security news. So like for me, I have, there's so many, cybersecurity newsletters out there, cybersecurity reporting and stuff. So I think you just got to pick one or two or three. But I think that's one of the first things is just knowing what's going on right now in cybersecurity. And so like you got to follow even if you don't have a job in cybersecurity right now, you should be following um, cybersecurity newsletters, events, like the things that are going on. There's daily things going on. Like there's so much going on, and that's just something that's gonna always be like, that's just the nature of cybersecurity and technology.
Yeah, so you're saying stay up to date with current events, vulnerabilities, and threats.
Yeah, just in general, like see what's out there, like follow the news, basically, cyber news.
You talked about focusing on the most important things. If you were a smaller business and you only had 15,000 a year to spend on security and you were the security guy, what would you spend that 15,000 on? You'd buy really fancy risk acceptance software and accept everything.
Oh yeah, let's buy let's buy the most expensive software, most expensive new generation firewall, and just lock everything down, and then
We
I won't have to touch it, and then security will just take care of itself. Yeah, that's the night. Yeah, no, that's bad. What I would do first is I would first spend money on inventorying the network. So like,
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
yes. So like, before even starting to secure anything, you need to know what's going on. So like, what kind of, do employees have laptops? Do they have desktops? So are they using Macs? Are they using Windows? Are they using Google Enterprise Email? Are they using Outlook, like Microsoft? Like you just have to inventory everything. And I think having like automated system to like inventory what's going on in the network. Like,
Yes, by the way, I don't know if you realize this, but what you just said is CIS critical control 1 and 2.
you're right. I think you're right. Anyways, so the more information you can get, the easier decisions are to make. So like when it comes to security, when you inventory your network, when you know exactly what's going on, it's not just this black hole of random IT plugged in wherever you want. It's an organized structure, even if it's not super organized, at least somewhat. You gotta have an organized. Um, if it's not organized at all, maybe you need to even do that before you even inventory. But hopefully, you don't have to do that as a security person. But if you inventory everything, that will kind of just make decisions for you, basically. Like, okay, we have a couple Windows servers, we have some AWS, whatever. Like, then it's like, okay, we need some security here, we need some security here. So then
Nice.
I would determine like, so like, yeah, first inventory, then you can make the decisions on what if any products to get, whatever. So
Yeah, so this is a really good segue because one of the things you that one of the really interesting things about those critical controls is it doesn't take that much money to inventory your assets. Like it's a very process-based thing. You could even go work with if you have like just an IT guy in your org that you work at, like just a sysadmin that's not security. You could just go work with him and say, "Hey, how can we inventory everything properly? What does it look like? You know, can I help you? This would really help me with security. How can we improve this?" And then within that, you buy maybe an additional inventory tool that helps you guys do that better. But I mean, that's not going to be that expensive, is it? Just to inventory? I don't know. Um, so that right there is a really great example of how you avoid buying snake oil products. And I've worked at 3 vendors now, so maybe I shouldn't be the saying that, but I feel like there's a lot of snake oil in the industry, and some of it's bad, some of it's great because it causes more competition, and I love competition. Um, but when you put your initiatives within these goals that you have that are
mm-hmm.
often very process and people focused, it generally doesn't cost as much money. So we talked about the inventory of assets and software. Let's say you tackled that. What's next? You have, I don't know, $5,000 left. What are you going to do?
Well, I mean, I'm glad you brought up the CIS controls, because I think that does those frameworks. There's already frameworks out there that kind of cover things, and so I think following that is not a bad thing.
So you're saying compliance is good? Frameworks are good?
Uh-oh. Am I going into dangerous territory? Well, maybe there's a bad rep for compliance because when people think of compliance, they think of checking boxes. Like that's just almost synonymous in people's minds. But I don't I don't think it has to be that case because um, yeah, depending on the small business, you might have to be compliant with certain things, and it can easily be check boxes because it's like, oh, let's cover this and we're secure. Or yeah, some people might say like, oh, now that we're PCI compliant, our PCI systems are secure.
Yeah, that's a fallacy. Oh,
It's
but
a little bit more in between that needs to happen.
but to bring it back, you brought, well, why don't we follow CIS? CIS Control 3 is data protection, and I think that's really important. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what important data do we have? Do we have backups for it? Are we securing it? I mean, that's a very plausible next step. And again, that's very people and process focused.
That's
Tech
true.
might support specific goals within that. Number 4
Yeah.
is secure config of enterprise assets and software. Again, makes sense, locking down, I mean, modifying your golden image, things like that. I don't know that you'd have a
And,
golden. Anyways, go.
well, and like with that, like when it comes to inventory, like once you inventory what's there, then you got to kind of start prioritizing from a security mindset of like what are business critical systems versus just like a spare computer on the side. Like there's kind of a whole range.
Yep, totally. So
So
going down the list here as well, number 5 is account management, access control management, continuous vulnerability management, audit log management, email and web browser protections, malware defenses, data recovery. Okay, so I disagree if you were to take this in order for a small business because email and web browser protections and malware defenses should be up there almost at number 1, like after inventory.
yeah, when it comes to small business, like yeah, definitely you can't just say I'm going to implement everything. Like I think you got to take the framework and apply it to your company. Like because some things might not be relevant at all. Things might be critical. So like you said, some of those things might need to shift around. So you gotta kind of determine that. So
Yep. Okay, so we've had a good conversation here. I hope you'll come back on sometime again.
so uh, a couple of thoughts from the questions that you asked. One of them was about like um, something I've been learning about.
Ooh, let's hear it.
So I kind of categorize it as micro automation. So and when I say so, when I think of automation, it's like in as a whole in the company or as like security controls or alerting, whatever. But when I say micro automation, I mean like almost just little automated things in the day to day, little tasks, like little scripts, basically. Like you have a little script or a little keyboard shortcut or whatever. I think day to day analysts can like I'm not going to go into the burnout, but like that exists. Like it's possible for analysts to get burned out because in a SOC it's 24/7 and um, there's just it's a lot on your brain, a lot in your eyes and everything. So like, and if you do long shifts, depending like SOCs have to be 24/7, and that means some people are going to work nights and some people are going to work longer hours. And so like anyway, something that has helped me in my day to day be less like overwhelmed about things is having those little scripts, keyboard shortcuts, little
Yes.
browser extensions, little
Yes.
things like that. Because like I don't know, maybe it's just me, but it sounds like
No.
not. But like if I'm doing an investigation, like the interface of the program I'm using, it matters because it might take me longer to do an investigation if the interface is bad, or and then on the other hand, things can speed up investigations if you're using those little shortcuts and downloads and extensions or whatever, whether they're public or things that you develop in-house. Like, and so I've been learning how to make like a browser extension and little scripts to help do those things. And I think that's something that's worth, yeah,
Yeah. So
it's worth things. So
I think this is a really good time. I mean, this could literally be a whole podcast episode on automation. I mean, you don't only have this, but you also have SOAR, which is a huge deal for SOCs. I mean,
yeah, oh my gosh, yeah,
that's a big deal for burnout.
that can cut. Like if you don't have SOAR, like your investigation is going to take hours. But if you have SOAR, like all the information that you need is there, and you just investigate, and then
Yeah.
you can know if something's a threat or not sooner. You can you can contain whatever process faster. Anyways, yeah.
Yep. So the my brother, who actually was on a previous podcast, got me started on something called Keyboard Maestro, and it's essentially where you can click and create hotkeys and run scripts and do all sorts of stuff. So you'll have to send me what you're using, like just what framework. If you're using Python, like what are you? Are you just using Python scripts and browser
Well,
extensions that you've created?
the thing, I mean, with browser extensions, it's JavaScript that's behind those. So like that's what I've been learning mostly. But Python's there, Excel, like scripts as well can be there.
Sure.
Anyways,
Cool.
but yeah, maybe one last thought. Hopefully, I'm not, if you're okay with
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
that. I think this is just something that's kind of important. You asked me like what about end users, but it made me think like how can we help end users in a company? So like
Yeah, how can we?
yeah, so two things I would say is one is continue training, like user training, however that happens. Like something needs to be there because there are certain vulnerabilities that come through like any old employee, and so there needs to be some amount of training, and so that there's awareness, so that they can defend against things. So that needs to be there. But also, what I've learned so far is that we need to be kind and understanding. It might sound a little cheesy, but
Wait, you don't want to shame them for anything they do?
you clicked on that link. I can't believe like how you're so dumb.
How dumb are you to do that?
No, because but like in reality, like it's so obvious for some links. Like it's like okay, that phishing link is so obvious. Link, like why did they click it, or why did they click that and get a scam on their computer, whatever. And so I think we need to stay grounded in that sense because we're so involved in security. We know what's up. We know what's going on. We know how to protect and defend. But like end users, it's just almost zero. And so, for example, like if someone gets like a scary pop-up on their computer, we need to understand that that is literally scary for them. Like it can, I don't know if I'd go so far as like traumatic, but like it's like scary and they're worried and it's like stressful and it affects them. And so, we need to be available so that people can ask questions and say, "Hey, is this malicious?" And then we can help. So like, make sure users are aware that you're there, that you can help, and when things happen, we should be kind and understanding to people because we to say like for you again, it's like so obvious. Oh, why did you click that? But like, you just need to say like, okay, they don't know better. And instead of being frustrated and mad at someone, just take that as information and say, okay, we need to train more on this, people. So
Yep,
just
cool.
turn it around and then it'll happen less. So I just wanted to say that out there.